The boarding announcement echoed through Reagan National as I folded my final diplomatic briefing. 44 years representing our nation abroad, and now, at 70, I was simply Eleanor Hartwell, returning home to surprise my son. Before we begin this journey together, would you take a moment to hit that like button? Your support means everything to this community of strong women sharing our stories. Phoenix in October should have been golden and welcoming. Instead, as my taxi pulled into Thomas's neighborhood in Scottsdale, something felt wrong. The desert landscape I remembered as pristine now seemed neglected, shadows falling where they shouldn't. My grandmother's cameo brooch pressed against my chest, a talisman I'd worn through every difficult negotiation. Today it felt heavier than usual, as if anticipating the weight of what lay ahead. Thomas's house sat at the end of Saguaro Lane, but the careful landscaping I remembered had given way to brown patches and overgrown mesquite bushes. The mailbox overflowed with notices, and newspapers yellowed on the terracotta steps. "This the right address, ma'am?" the driver asked, concern threading his voice. I nodded, though certainty had abandoned me. My architect's son would never allow such deterioration. Thomas built precision into everything, from childhood Lego structures to the sustainable housing projects that had made his reputation. The key still worked, but inside felt hollow. Mail scattered across saltillo tiles, dust coating surfaces that should have gleamed. In the kitchen, I found dishes crusted with food I couldn't identify, and the air carried that particular staleness of spaces unlived in. Across the courtyard, I glimpsed Mrs. Rodriguez watering her roses. When our eyes met through the window, her expression carried something that made my diplomatic instincts sharpen. Pity, deep, unmistakable pity that spoke of knowledge I didn't yet possess. The October heat pressed against my shoulders as I crossed the courtyard toward Mrs. Rodriguez. 44 years of reading faces across the negotiation tables had taught me to recognize when someone carried unwelcome news. "Eleanor," she set down her watering can with the careful deliberation of someone choosing words. "I didn't know you were coming." Neither did Thomas, apparently. The words emerged sharper than intended. I softened my tone. Diplomacy was habit, even in crisis. "How long has the house looked like this?" Mrs. Rodriguez glanced toward Thomas's property, then back to me. The pause stretched until I could hear desert wind through the Palo Verde trees. "Eleanor, honey," she touched my arm with weathered fingers. "When did you last speak with your son?" The question landed wrong, like a note played in the wrong key. 3 weeks ago. We video-called while I was finishing my assignment in Copenhagen. Why? I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. The cameo brooch seemed to pulse against my chest, my grandmother's voice echoing across decades. "Trust your instincts, mija. They've kept our family alive through revolutions. He's been at Phoenix General for 2 weeks," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "The ICU. They took him by ambulance one night, sirens wailing through the whole neighborhood. The desert horizon tilted. I gripped the adobe wall, feeling its rough texture bite into my palm. "And Vanessa?" Mrs. Rodriguez's expression shifted to something I couldn't immediately identify. That's not my story to tell. But Eleanor, you need to get there. Soon." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of creosote and something else. The metallic taste of truth approaching like a monsoon storm. Some revelations arrive like desert lightning, sudden, illuminating, and impossible to ignore. Phoenix General's ICU smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. My heels clicked against polished linoleum as I followed signs that might as well have led to my own execution. The cameo brooch bounced gently against my heart with each step. "Thomas Hartwell?" I asked at the nurse's station, my diplomatic voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. The young nurse looked up, her expression softening with recognition of shared grief. "Are you family?" "I'm his mother." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps relief. "Room 318. Dr. Patel will want to speak with you immediately. He's been waiting for someone to come." The hallway stretched endlessly. I had walked corridors of power from Washington to Geneva, but none had felt this long, this heavy with consequence. Through glass windows, I glimpsed other families maintaining vigils. their faces mapped with the geography of hope and surrender. Room 318's door stood slightly ajar. I paused, my hand on the frame, and heard the mechanical rhythm of machines keeping time with a failing heart. Thomas lay connected to monitors painting electronic mountains across their screens. My son, my tall, strong son, who used to sketch buildings with mathematical precision, looked fragile as parchment against white sheets. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance. Tubes and wires traced over him like a cruel blueprint. "Mom," the word was barely a whisper, but it carried 46 years of history between us. I crossed the room in 3 steps, took his hand, and felt the cameo pulse like a second heartbeat against my chest. I had arrived, but perhaps not in time for the conversation that mattered most. Dr. Aaron Patel carried himself with the careful grace of someone who delivered difficult news for a living. His office overlooked the hospital parking lot, where cars arrived full of hope and departed heavy with grief. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm grateful you're here." He gestured to a chair that had probably absorbed countless tears. "I assume no one has briefed you on your son's condition." I sat with the poise learned from years of receiving classified briefings, but my hands betrayed me, fingers intertwined so tightly they ached. "Tell me everything." "Advanced liver cancer. Diagnosed 8 weeks ago, though he'd been symptomatic for months." Dr. Patel spoke with clinical precision, but his eyes held genuine compassion. "I'm sorry to say it's quite aggressive. Terminal." The cameo seemed to stop warming my skin. I absorbed each word like physical blows, my diplomatic training the only thing keeping me upright. "How long?" "Days. Perhaps a week at most." He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to ask, where is his wife? We've been trying to reach her for medical decisions, but—" "You can't reach Vanessa?" The question emerged sharper than intended. Dr. Patel glanced at his notes, then back at me. "She visited once, the day after admission. Since then, nothing. The billing department mentioned some irregularities with insurance authorizations, but I assumed it was administrative confusion." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. In 44 years of diplomatic service, I had learned that the most dangerous revelations often arrived wearing the mask of mundane details. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals hide behind the most ordinary explanations. Back in Thomas's room, I held my son's hand and watched his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. He drifted between consciousness and medicated sleep, sometimes squeezing my fingers, sometimes whispering words I couldn't quite catch. "Where's Vanessa?" I finally asked during one of his clearer moments. Thomas's eyes moved to the window, where Phoenix's skyline shimmered in afternoon heat. "She's busy." His voice carried the weight of a man who had made peace with disappointing truths. "The art gallery opening. You know how she gets about her projects." I knew no such thing. In 4 years of marriage, Vanessa had launched a wellness blog, a handmade jewelry line, and a lifestyle coaching business, each venture lasting exactly as long as Thomas's financial enthusiasm. But I kept these observations to myself. "She could visit in the evenings," I suggested gently. Thomas's laugh turned into a cough that summoned a nurse. After the medical attention passed, he looked at me with eyes that seemed decades older than his 46 years. "Mom, she hasn't been here since Monday. It's Thursday." The cameo pulsed against my ribs. "Thomas, sweetheart, I know what you're thinking." His words came slowly, each one deliberate. "But I need you to understand something. I chose this. I chose her, knowing who she was. Maybe I thought love could change people, or maybe I just got tired of being alone after the divorce." I squeezed his hand, recognizing the particular exhaustion of someone who had spent years making excuses for another person's character. Some marriages die from grand betrayals. Others simply suffocate under the weight of accumulated small disappointments. What would you do in Eleanor's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. While Thomas slept, I retrieved his personal items from the hospital safe. His wallet contained the usual artifacts of modern life: credit cards, business cards, a photo of us hiking Camelback Mountain from 2 summers ago. But his phone told a different story. The battery was nearly dead, but I found the charger in his bedside drawer. As it powered up, Notifications cascaded across the screen like digital confetti. Missed calls, unopened texts, Instagram alerts featuring someone living their best life, while the phone's owner fought for breath. I scrolled through recent calls. Vanessa's number appeared frequently in the first few days after his admission, then vanished entirely. No missed calls from her in 5 days. But there were other numbers, persistent ones from banks, creditors, medical billing companies. One voicemail made my hands tremble. Mr. Hartwell, this is Amanda from Scottsdale Luxury Rentals, regarding the Range Rover charges on your American Express. We need immediate payment of $12,000, or we'll be forced to pursue collection. Another. Thomas, it's Marcus at Cartier Scottsdale. Vanessa's bracelet is ready for pickup. The total came to $15,000, but your card was declined. I set the phone down and stared out at the Phoenix skyline. Each voicemail painted a picture I didn't want to see. My dying son's credit cards being used for luxuries while he lay alone, connected to machines. The cameo in my pocket felt like evidence now, warming against my skin, in rhythm with truth. I wasn't sure I could bear to fully understand. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals are counted in dollars and documented in digital receipts. Friday evening arrived with the golden light that makes Phoenix look like a painting. I had spent 20 hours beside Thomas's bed, watching monitors trace the geography of his remaining time. Dr. Patel had quietly increased the morphine drip. Mom. Thomas's voice was barely audible above the machine's rhythm. I need to tell you something. I leaned closer, my ear near his lips. The cameo pressed against my heart as I bent forward. The house. There are papers in my study. Hidden drawer in the desk. Each word cost him effort. You need to know about the money. About everything. Shh, sweetheart. Rest now. But Thomas's eyes opened wider, focusing with the clarity that sometimes comes just before the end. She doesn't know you're here. Does she? Vanessa doesn't know you came home. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Good. Something that might have been relief crossed his features. I wrote you a letter. It's with the papers. I wanted you to understand why I couldn't... Why you couldn't what, my love? Why I couldn't ask for help. Why I let it get this bad. His hand found mine with surprising strength. I was ashamed, Mom, of how completely, utterly foolish I'd been. I kissed his forehead, tasting salt. His tears or mine, I couldn't tell. You were never foolish, Thomas. You loved someone who didn't deserve it. That's not foolish. That's just heartbreaking. He smiled then, and for a moment I saw the boy who used to bring me desert wildflowers from our backyard. Take care of the foundation, Mom. Don't let it all be for nothing. Thomas died at 4:23 a.m. on Saturday morning, while I dozed in the chair beside his bed. I woke to silence, the absence of the breathing machine's rhythm, the flat line of monitors that had become my son's digital heartbeat. A nurse appeared within minutes, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to death's timing. I'm so sorry, she whispered, and began the process of documenting the end of a life. I sat holding Thomas's still warm hand, feeling the cameo tick against my chest like a second heart that refused to stop. Around me, the hospital continued its eternal cycle, babies being born 3 floors up, while lives concluded here in the ICU. Mrs. Hartwell? Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway. There are some forms, when you're ready. I nodded without looking up from my son's face. In death, he looked younger somehow, free from the weight of whatever secrets he'd carried. The papers he'd mentioned seemed to whisper from across the city, waiting in that hidden drawer like archived evidence of a life half understood. Doctor, I said quietly, has anyone contacted you about funeral arrangements? Has his wife called? Dr. Patel hesitated. Mrs. Hartwell, no one has called about your son. Not once since his admission. We thought you would handle those details. I finally looked up, meeting his confused gaze. His wife hasn't called? Not even to confirm he's gone? The doctor's expression shifted as understanding dawned. Ma'am, no one has inquired about your son except the billing department regarding overdue payments. The cameo stopped warming my skin. In its place came the sound of truth, arriving like thunder after lightning. The drive back to Scottsdale felt like traveling through someone else's memory. I sat in the taxi clutching Thomas's house keys, watching familiar desert neighborhoods blur past, while my mind struggled to process the magnitude of abandonment I had just witnessed. Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from her house as the taxi pulled away. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry about Thomas. Is there anything—" "She doesn't know." The words came out flat, factual. "His wife doesn't know he's gone." Mrs. Rodriguez's face crumpled with horrified understanding. "Oh, mija, I was hoping I was wrong about her." Inside Thomas's house, I went directly to his study. The room smelled faintly of drafting paper and desert dust. Behind his architectural prints, I found the hidden drawer he'd mentioned, a secret compartment he'd built himself, containing a thick manila folder. My name was written across the front in Thomas's careful handwriting. "For Mom, when everything falls apart." The letter lay on top, 4 pages in his architect's precise hand. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone and you're probably furious. You should be. I've made terrible choices, and the worst one was not calling you when I got diagnosed. Vanessa doesn't know about this letter, and I need it to stay that way until you decide what to do with the information inside." My hands trembled as I turned to the supporting documents. Bank statements showing systematic withdrawals, credit card bills for purchases I couldn't imagine Thomas making, a private investigator's report with photographs that made my stomach lurch. The Cameo began warming again, but now it felt like a countdown timer, marking moments until justice would need to be served. The private investigator's photos spread across Thomas's desk like playing cards in a game where everyone loses. Vanessa at the Four Seasons Spa while Thomas received his first chemotherapy. Vanessa shopping on Rodeo Drive while her husband was signing his will. Vanessa boarding a yacht called Desert Rose while Thomas was alone in the ICU. Each image was dated and time-stamped. The investigator, someone named Carlos Mendez, had been thorough. I found his business card clipped to a summary report that read like evidence for a divorce that would never come. The bank statements told their own story. Thomas's architectural firm account, once healthy with 6 figures, had been systematically drained. Not stolen. The signatures were legitimate, the withdrawals authorized. But every expense seemed designed to fund a lifestyle that had nothing to do with a dying man's needs. $6,800 for a spa weekend in Sedona, while Thomas was having his first scan. $11,200 for jewelry from a boutique in Paradise Valley, while he was meeting with oncologists. $4,500 for dinner at Nobu for 10 people while he was home. Too nauseated to eat, I found myself calculating, if Vanessa had stayed home just 3 nights a week, if she had skipped just half of these indulgences, Thomas could have afforded experimental treatments, private nursing care, comfort measures that insurance wouldn't cover. The Cameo pulsed steadily now, marking time in a rhythm that felt like evidence accumulating, like justice preparing to announce itself. At the bottom of the folder lay one more document, a power of attorney, signed but never filed, that would have given Vanessa control of everything. Thank God for small mercies and bureaucratic delays. I stared at Vanessa's number in Thomas's phone for 30 minutes before dialing. The Cameo warmed against my chest as I listened to it ring once, twice, then connect to voicemail. "Hey, beautiful souls. You've reached Vanessa Hartwell, wellness guru and life optimizer. I'm probably manifesting abundance right now, so leave a message, and I'll call you back when the universe aligns." I hung up and immediately dialed again. This time, Vanessa answered on the second ring. "Tommy, oh my God, finally. I've been trying to reach you, but your phone keeps dying. Are you feeling better? Because I really need to talk about the credit card situation." "Vanessa," my diplomatic voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "This is Eleanor Hartwell, Thomas's mother." Silence. Then, "Eleanor, what are you— I thought you were in Europe or something." "I was. I came home 4 days ago. I've been with Thomas at Phoenix General." I let that sink in before continuing. "He died this morning at 4:23 a.m. The pause stretched long enough for me to hear music and laughter in the background. A party. Vanessa was at a party while receiving news of her husband's death. "Oh, The word came out flat, almost distracted. Oh, that's... When is the funeral? Because I have this retreat in Tulum that I really can't miss, and... I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not with grief anymore. The cameo had stopped warming and settled into something that felt like resolve. I had dealt with narcissists in international negotiations. I knew the type, but I had never dealt with one who had destroyed my son's final months. I spent Sunday creating what I privately called my diplomatic briefing, a comprehensive file that would make the State Department proud. Thomas's letter provided context, the photographs offered evidence, and the financial records told a story that would make even the most lenient judge reach for their gavel. But I needed backup, professional backup. Miguel Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's son, and a prominent Phoenix attorney, arrived at 2 p.m. with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to ugly family disputes. I had known him since he was 10 years old, building forts with Thomas, while their mothers shared coffee and neighborhood gossip. "I'm sorry about Thomas," he said, settling into the living room chair that still held the impression of my son's body. "My mother told me what's been happening." I handed him the folder. "I need to know what's legal and what's just satisfying." Miguel spent 90 minutes reading, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. When he finished, he looked up with an expression I recognized from my diplomatic days, the face of someone who had just seen evidence of crimes they would remember forever. "Eleanor, this is financial elder abuse, systematic exploitation of a dying person." He tapped the private investigator's photos. "These aren't just morally reprehensible. They're legally actionable under Arizona law. Did Thomas ever file for divorce? He was too sick, and I think he still loved her, despite everything." Miguel nodded grimly. "Then she's entitled to the estate as his surviving spouse. Unless what? Unless we can prove spousal abandonment, which, given this evidence, shouldn't be difficult." The cameo began warming again, but now it sounded like opportunity announcing itself. Vanessa arrived the Tuesday afternoon in a white Tesla that Thomas's credit cards had undoubtedly financed. She wore funeral attire that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her grief performance began before she reached the front door. "Oh, Eleanor!" She threw her arms wide, designer tears already glistening. "I can't believe our Tommy is gone. I've been absolutely shattered, just completely end the performance." My voice carried 44 years of authority. "We need to talk." Vanessa's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating behind the tears. Then it snapped back into place. "I know you're grieving, but there's no need to be hostile. We're both suffering. Where were you Saturday morning at 4:23 a.m.? The question landed like a slap. Vanessa's perfectly contoured face went pale beneath her makeup. What do you mean? When your husband died? Where were you?" It happened so fast I didn't even know he was that sick." I opened the manila folder and spread the private investigator's photos across the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Vanessa's eyes widened as she saw herself captured in high definition, living her best life while Thomas fought for his breath. "September 15th, Tommy's first chemo session." I pointed to a photo of Vanessa at a Scottsdale spa. "September 22nd, his emergency room visit." Another photo, Vanessa at a wellness retreat in Sedona. "October 3rd, the day he signed his will." A final image, Vanessa shopping for jewelry that cost more than some people's cars. Vanessa stared at the photos, her performance finally, completely shattered. "Now," I said quietly, "let's discuss what happens next." "I can explain everything," Vanessa began, but her voice had lost its practiced confidence. The photos stared up at her like accusations that couldn't be charmed away. "Please do." I settled back in my chair with the patience of someone who had conducted negotiations with war criminals. "Start with the Tesla rental. $12,000 while your husband couldn't afford private nursing care." Vanessa's hands fluttered over the images like butterflies avoiding flames. It was a business expense. I was creating content for my wellness brand, and the car was part of my image. "What wellness brand?" My question cut through the explanation. "According to Thomas's records, you haven't filed business taxes in 3 years. The silence stretched until Vanessa realized she was trapped. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for the first time, I saw something real in my daughter-in-law's expression. Panic. "Look, you don't understand the pressure I was under." Vanessa's voice became defensive. "Do you know what it's like being married to someone who's dying? The hospitals, the treatments, the constant negativity. I needed outlets. I needed to maintain my vibration." I felt the cameo pulse against my chest, its rhythm steady as a judge's heartbeat. "So you spent his money to maintain your vibration while he died alone." "He wasn't alone. I visited once. You visited once in 2 weeks." I leaned forward, my diplomatic training replaced by something more primal. "While you were maintaining your vibration on his dime, your husband was asking nurses if anyone had called for him." Vanessa's composure cracked completely. "What do you want from me?" I smiled then, and it carried 44 years of knowing exactly how to dismantle someone's defenses. "I want several things," I began, pulling out documents Miguel had prepared. "First, you're going to sign over any claim to Thomas's life insurance policy. Second, you're going to repay every frivolous expense you charged to his accounts during his illness. Third, you're going to disappear from this family's life permanently." Vanessa's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You can't make me do any of that. I'm his legal wife. I have rights." "You abandoned him." My words dropped like stones into still water. "Legally, morally, and medically. Miguel Rodriguez has already filed preliminary papers documenting spousal abandonment. Given this evidence, no judge in Maricopa County will side with you." I slid another photograph across the table, one I had saved for last. It showed Vanessa at a rooftop party, laughing and toasting with champagne, while the timestamp indicated Thomas was receiving his final blood transfusion. This photo was taken 8 hours before Thomas died. You were celebrating while he was suffocating. The nurses have sworn affidavits about your absence. The credit card statements show systematic financial abuse. The private investigator has documented a pattern of narcissistic abandonment that would make psychology textbooks weep. Vanessa stared at the image of herself, perhaps seeing for the first time how her choices looked from the outside. I didn't know he was that close to." "You didn't know because you chose not to know. There's a difference." The cameo ticked steadily as I pulled out a pen and placed it beside the documents. "Sign these papers, take your personal belongings, and leave. Or explain your choices to a judge who's buried both his parents." Vanessa signed with trembling hands. After Vanessa drove away, in the Tesla that would soon be repossessed, I sat alone in Thomas's house. The silence felt different now, less hollow and more cleansed. I held my son's letter and read it again, focusing on a passage that had initially broken my heart, but now provided strange comfort. "I know what she is, Mom. I've known for months, but I couldn't face the idea of dying alone, and I was too proud to ask you to come home early. Maybe that makes me weak, or maybe it just makes me human. Either way, I need you to know that I chose this path. Don't blame yourself for not saving me from my own choices. Just don't let it all be for nothing." The life insurance policy was substantial, $750,000 that Thomas had apparently managed to keep secret from his wife. Combined with the recovered funds from canceled credit cards and repossessed luxury items, I found myself the unlikely inheritor of nearly $1 million. I could retire comfortably, travel the world I'd spent decades navigating professionally, or simply disappear into the quiet dignity of a diplomat's pension. Instead, I found myself researching something entirely different. Phoenix Children's Hospital had a program for terminal pediatric patients whose families couldn't afford extended hospital stays, children who faced death alone because poverty had scattered their families across states and countries. I called Dr. Patel, who connected me with pediatric oncology. Within a week, I had toured a ward that broke my heart and simultaneously showed me how to heal it. "We have children who die without ever having a visitor," Dr. Sarah Martinez explained, showing me a room where an 8-year-old named Isabella slept attached to machines that looked hauntingly familiar. The Thomas Hartwell Pediatric Comfort Fund launched 3 months after the funeral, operating out of a small office I rented near Phoenix Children's Hospital. I had hired Rosa Martinez, a bilingual social worker who specialized in family crisis intervention, and together we created something unprecedented, a program that provided not just money, but presence. Isabella became our first success story, though success felt inadequate for helping a child die with dignity. Her parents lived in Guadalajara and couldn't afford the travel expenses or time away from their restaurant. Through the fund, I arranged for them to fly to Phoenix and stay in a nearby hotel for Isabella's final weeks. "Mama! Papa!" Isabella's face transformed when her parents walked into her hospital room. I watched from the doorway as an ocean of separation collapsed into an embrace that made every dollar spent feel like the most important investment of my diplomatic career. The cameo in my jacket, I still carried it everywhere, warmed steadily as I observed the reunion, but now its rhythm sounded less like urgency and more like contentment. "Mrs. Hartwell?" Dr. Martinez appeared beside me. "We have a new case, a 10-year-old named David, whose grandmother is his only family, but she's afraid to leave her job because they need the insurance." I nodded, already mentally calculating arrangements and possibilities. The fund had grown beyond my initial investment. News coverage of the program had generated donations from across Arizona, from other military families, from people who understood that children shouldn't face death alone because of circumstances beyond their control. "Schedule the meeting," I said, feeling Thomas's letter crinkle in my jacket pocket. His final words had been about shame and foolishness, but this felt like the opposite of both. This felt like wisdom emerging from wreckage. 1 year after Thomas's death, I stood in the pediatric ward's family lounge, watching Isabella, now in remission, teach origami to newer patients. Her parents had stayed in Phoenix, finding work with the hospital's maintenance department, and together they had become unofficial ambassadors for other Spanish-speaking families navigating the labyrinth of childhood cancer. The Thomas Hartwell Pediatric Comfort Fund had helped 67 families in its first year, 67 children who didn't die alone, 67 families who didn't choose between income and presence during their darkest hours. "Senora Eleanor," Isabella called out, holding up a paper crane that looked remarkably like the architectural sketches Thomas used to draw as a boy. "Para usted." I accepted the crane with hands that no longer shook, from a child who had taught me that healing often wears unexpected faces. The cameo in my jacket had long since stopped its urgent warming, settling into a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Steady, purposeful, alive. Mrs. Rodriguez found me there an hour later, sharing cookies with children who were fighting battles that would have broken lesser spirits. "You look different," my neighbor observed. At peace, I considered this, watching Isabella demonstrate crane folding to a little boy, whose parents drove 8 hours every weekend from rural New Mexico to be with him. I suppose I've finally figured out what my grandmother's cameo was pointing toward. Which is? I smiled, thinking of Thomas's letter, of Vanessa's empty performances, of the space between justice and mercy. True north isn't a direction. It's a decision, the choice to transform devastation into purpose. The cameo pulsed gently against my heart, no longer measuring time, but marking moments when broken things become beautiful again. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and transformation. Share this with someone who needs to hear that even our deepest pain can become our greatest purpose. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Eleanor's situation? Your wisdom and support mean everything to this community of strong women. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us we're never alone in our struggles.